don't, there we go.
Okay.
I think we might. Testing 1, 2. Hello, friends. If you can hear me, if you could just give us, there we go. There we go.
We got it, we got sound.
All right. Sorry, friends. We will make sure we post a time mark so others can watch it. Guys, thank you so much for sticking with us. We just had some confusion with how to do our microphone. Let's switch there. Okay. I want to double check that we're still good now that I have just our presentation on the screen. Okay, perfect. All right, everyone. Oh, thank you guys so much. Welcome to Bee Friendly Gardening. Finally, long awaited. We have our Bee Friendly Gardening with bee best friend and general gardening gal, my boss, and your teen, youth services manager, Miss Julia, to tell us all about some organic gardening and pollinator friendly with butterflies, hummingbirds, and of course our best pollinators, bees. Here we go from Miss Julia.
Thank you so much for your patience, everybody. We're really excited to be able to talk about bee-friendly gardening. I am a big fan of bees, as you might have guessed. And thank you to Carrie, our teen associate, for introducing me. I'm the youth services manager. And we'll be happy to take your questions as I'm presenting. Carrie is going to be on our Facebook page. So if you have questions as we go through, please feel free to ask. I am a self-proclaimed bee enthusiast and general gardening gal. So a lot of the things I've learned just by doing or finding books and doing some personal research. So if I can't answer your question, I know a place with a lot of great books, Manitowoc Public Library, where I can refer you to get some great information. Also, UW-Madison, a lot of the information I have on identifying bees comes straight from Madison. So we have some really fantastic resources both online and at the library if you're interested in expanding your bee knowledge. So, without further ado, and with audio now, thank you as we learn some new technology. I'm really glad we could have you guys join us this morning. We're going to go through some bee-friendly gardening and see how you can help some pollinators in your own backyard. So a lot of us know about honeybees, of course, and honey is delicious, of course. Honeybees are wonderful pollinators, but they are not native Wisconsin bees. The type of honeybee that we have in Wisconsin is actually a European honeybee that was brought over for domestic purposes, and most honeybees cannot survive in the wild. They survive in domesticated hives. But we have over 400 species of native Wisconsin bees. Over 400 species, and some that we haven't even identified yet. So Wisconsin has quite a few pollinators. Now, as Carrie said, there's also hummingbirds and butterflies. Those are wonderful pollinators as well. I'm going to focus today on the bees and identifying bees because I'm a bee nerd. But again, if you have more questions about pollinators, I highly recommend checking out UW-Madison or the library. And a lot of these bee-friendly tips are going to be friendly for all of our pollinators. So just to give you an idea of some of the really great species we have in Wisconsin alone, we have over 20 bumblebee species. Isn't that nuts? I thought there was just one bumblebee. Nope, there's over 20 varieties of bumblebee. There's also a really cute little guy. He's in your upper right-hand corner. He's called the leafcutter bee. And he's called a leafcutter because they go actually up to leaves, cut chunks out, and that's how they make their nests with pieces of leaves. They fly around chunks of leaves, and they are just super adorable and fuzzy. We also have that middle picture, one of my favorites. It's called a green sweat bee. It's called that because it's attracted to the sweat on your skin, which you might be thinking, ew, gross. But they are very friendly and very rarely sting. And I just love them because they are metallic green. You might think bees only are black and yellow, but bees come in a variety of colors, including green, and I just think that's really neat. And that last picture down at the bottom. Those little guys are mason bees, and they are so friendly. They very rarely sting, and they can be held in your hand. Now, do I recommend going out and holding bees in your hands? No, I do not. Please practice safety for both you and the pollinators. Don't just go around and try to catch bees, because bees will sting if they feel like their lives are or their hives are in danger. Bees are very non-aggressive, and they generally only have one sting, so when they sting, they die. So they will not sting unless it's their very last alternative, unlike wasps and hornets, which we'll get into a little bit later. So a lot of these bees, very non-aggressive, very docile, and they will really improve both your garden and the ecosystem by doing a few bee-friendly tips. Before we get into that, I want to give you some information about the WIBEE app. It's a really fantastic resource that I've been using this summer, and I wanted to share with you guys. It's a free app from UW-Madison. And it's really difficult, as you can imagine, to track the health of native Wisconsin bee populations because they're not domesticated. And so UW-Madison is asking for growers and gardeners help to track the health of Wisconsin bees. So what you can do, you can download this app. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know anything about bees, I can't really help with this, the app will actually teach you about different varieties of bees. It's how I learned about a lot of our bee species. And then you take a quiz to see if you can identify some bees, and then you can start taking surveys. So whether you have a garden, whether you have a big old yard, I have a huge garden that I grow a lot of veggies in, and I've been doing bee surveys. They take about 5 minutes, and basically you just tap the different kind of bee, as you can see in that picture. To the left, you tap the different bee you can identify, and then the data gets sent to UW-Madison, and they use it to see how healthy our bee populations are in Wisconsin. And that little guy, that handsome little guy at the bottom right, is our longhorn bee, so called because those antennae are super long. What a cutie. So the WIBEE app, I highly recommend if you're interested in learning more about bees and getting more involved, kind of being a citizen scientist. Feel free to download that app, and you can start helping UW-Madison track bee populations today. And it's really interesting for me to see like how many pollinators are visiting my yard as well. All right, so here I was talking about the difference between wasps and hornets before. How can you tell the difference between a wasp or a hornet, which are very aggressive, and our friendly native bee species? Because that's really important. There are a few key factors in when you want to identify a bee. The main one is look to see if it's fuzzy. So those two pictures on the upper screen of my presentation are pictures of to the right, that's our squash bee, which I see quite a bit. It looks a lot like a honeybee, but is slightly brighter coloring. And they love my squash and my pumpkin plants. I have tons of those in my yard. And the one to the left is a Carter bee. Now you notice both of them are fuzzy, and the fine hairs all over the bee's body are what actually allow them to collect pollen. Because bees are pollinators, wasps and hornets are not. I'm not sure what they do, but they're jerks and they don't pollinate. So, so fuzzy. Make sure if you're trying to identify something, just look for the hairs on the bees. Now that being said, most bee species have hairs on them. Some look almost hairless, but for the most part, you're going to have those fine hairs for collecting pollen. Another key factor is they have kind of short, stocky legs. If you look on the bottom left, with the insect with the long dangling legs, that's a key characteristic of a wasp. If you see the legs dangling, that is not a bee. Wasps also have that really pinched, narrow waist in the middle. And bees, I like to think of as fat and happy. So bees are going to be a little fatter and stockier and fuzzier, whereas if you get something really pinched in the middle, or with those long dangling legs, it's going to be something that's aggressive. To the right is a picture of a hornet. You can see really bright coloring, that pinched abdomen, and it also has really long, skinny wings. And with bees, generally have shorter, fatter wings. Not always the case again, but generally they'll have those shorter, fatter wings for flight. So those are some of the basic ways you can identify a bee. Remember fat and happy, and remember fuzzy. And you will most likely have a bee if it's fat and happy and fuzzy. And again, if you have questions as I'm going along, please feel free to ask. I'm happy to talk about bees or help you guys in your bee journey, learning more knowledge about some of my favorite insects. And so now that you know a little bit more about bees and our native bee populations, how can you be a friend to bees? One way is planting native wildflowers. So what you're doing for teens, if you picked up one of our wildflower kits, just planting those wildflowers is going to be a great way to help our bees. And we're going to go through whether you plant those wildflowers directly into the soil this fall, which you certainly can, they will sprout next spring, or whether you plant them in the pot and take care of them this winter and then transplant them outside in the spring. Either way, you're going to have some beautiful wildflowers for your lawn next year. Another thing to do is to rethink your lawn. A lot of the things we consider weeds are actually really great for pollinators. Things like dandelions, clover, and even ground ivy and violets provide pollen for those bees. So the less pesticides and fertilizers you can use on your lawns, they definitely have a negative effect on bees, the better. So instead of thinking of them as weeds, think of them as bee food. There's a whole movement called No Mow May, where people are encouraged to not mow their lawns or spray anything on the lawns for the entire month of May because bees are waking up, they're hungry, and they're looking for those native wildflowers like our dandelions. So rethink your lawn. Do you need all that grass, or can you invite some of our flowering native wildflowers into your lawn? And to build a home for solitary bees is another great one. So things like bees like the mason bee or the mining bee, they don't actually create hives, they dig, or they find holes to live in. And mason bees especially, they like to find little hotels or solitary bee homes like this. So they're very easy to construct. The solitary bee home is that top picture. It's just an example of one you could buy online. So any like hollowed out log or any small paper tubes. I mean, Pinterest this. You can make a very simple solitary bee home that will support mason bees in your yard. And remember, those are the super friendly ones that are very docile and very rarely sting. So having those in your yard is a big benefit, and they are non-aggressive. And again, if you're going to use pesticides and fertilizers, try to go for a more natural pesticide and fertilizer. You can use insecticidal soap. You could use a combination of compost. That's what I do for fertilizer. I have a compost. It uses up the scraps in my kitchen and also provides some really rich nutrients for the soil while also not upsetting the ecosystem or the bees. So just think, if you need to use pesticides or fertilizers, look for something that says bee friendly on it. And lastly, this is adorable, and I love this idea. Create a bee bath. It's super simple to make. You take a shallow dish, put some rocks in it so you have some landing spots for bees, and just fill it with enough water. Make sure those rocks still have plenty of dry spots for the bees to land, because bees need fresh water just like birds. So if you have a bee bath in your yard, you just refresh the water every couple days and have that out to give a little resting spot for our native bees. And those are some really simple tips to be more bee friendly. And now I know for the teens who have our wildflower pots, or for someone whom, if you even didn't have a kit and you're interested in planting some wildflowers, we have some wildflower planting tips for you. And Miss Carrie is going to come back to the mic. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment on the post, and I'll be happy to try to answer if I can. Otherwise, feel free to stop by the library. There's a lot of great pollinator and gardening resources at Manitowoc Public Library. All right, take it away, Carrie.
All right, hello everyone. Thank you guys so much for sticking with us through the audio issues and for coming back. For those who tried to watch on Monday, who are now watching today on Wednesday, thank you guys so much for coming back. We're sorry again. Oh my gosh, technology. It's wonderful, but sometimes, it takes a bit. All right, so let's get into it. So for those of you who got our kits, you got something called a Jiffy Pot, and this is the special seedling one, and it takes care of your seeds and helps it grow. So what you're gonna want to do is fill it with topsoil first, halfway. So topsoil is just basically what it says. It's the top of the soil, so the top dirt that's got a lot of good nutrients from the sun. So you'll fill that halfway up, and then you're going to water it thoroughly enough to saturate the walls of the pot, so you can tell when the dirt of the pot kind of gets darker brown. And then you're going to plant the seeds according to the directions on the seed packet. So friends who don't have our wildflower kit, just grab a wildflower seed packet, or sunflowers, cosmos, flowers like that, any fun wildflowers. And then you can plant those and then fill the pot with more topsoil. And then to harden off the plants, which is when you help them get ready to go outside. So what you're gonna do is you take them outside for maybe like an hour, just to start, so they can feel the sun and get used to the elements, the wind, and then you bring them back inside. Maybe you take them and put them in the shade for several days just to get like partial sun. And just let them slowly build up, an hour to two to a couple, and then bring them inside, then let them experience the night for a bit. So just like you would slowly get yourself ready to like rock climb, you wouldn't start just by climbing a mountain. You would try, a rock climbing gym at first. You'd try a wall at the Y first and then slowly build up your strength. That's what you're doing to your plants as well. And you might be thinking, well, what am I doing with my plant if I'm not putting it in the ground? You can put it in a ceramic pot if you'd like. One with a hole at the bottom is best for watering. So then you don't oversaturate the seeds and you don't overwater them. And you can also keep it in a gardening tray as well. That would be great. And then to transplant the pot, so if you decide to keep it in all winter or decide to plant it this fall, you just plant the whole pot and all. So you just take the pot and put it in the ground. Make sure the peat pot is completely covered by the garden soil, so you don't want it sticking up like, a cute little dirt pot just like popping out of the ground. That would be cute, but that's not what we need today. So we're going to make sure it's completely covered in the ground and just the little sprouts are popping out of the ground. And make sure you water it completely again, thoroughly. And then you should enjoy your beautiful blooms in 2 to 3 weeks. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us and for sticking with us through it all. We are Miss Julia and Miss Carrie from the Manquehog Public Library. And thank you guys so much. And remember to be friendly to your bees. Have a great rest of your day.